Just joining us, this will be part 2 of my conversation with the amazing Sam de Leve, all about rogues. So we can come back to the personality characteristics if we want. Would you at this point, should we jump back to class and start picking more stuff?
That tends to be where I build from. I do. So this is, you all are seeing how I will generally approach these kinds of builds for rogues, particularly, but also in general. This is an approach because you get to just skip around like this. And why not take advantage? It'll hold your decisions until you get back. So our next choice is expertise, which shows why in this build we did this skip around. We are going to pick 2 of our proficiencies, and we get to double our bonus. And I always pick stealth. Because we use it to hide. It is part of the core thing. And again, one of the common roles in most, if certainly not all, games of Dungeons and or Dragons. From here, it's entirely up to the flavor of rogue that you want to be. If you intend on doing a lot of sleight of hand or thieves' tool stuff, those are both very good proficiencies to take. I like taking deception right here. That is what I am inclined toward for this character because we are going to be a more charisma rogue. And again, if I lie, I want it to stick.
High stakes? But I can see that.
If you don't like your proficiencies or you don't feel like you got enough, wait. You will get more of these expertises later because rogues are great.
And truly, adding that twice, like, it's easy to ignore the way your proficiency bonus grows over time and the way that influences your play, but it really does add up as you go over time. And you will, especially depending on your subclass, you'll get a lot of... as a rogue, you're going to get a lot of sort of, here's how to make that work with your skills over time. All right, so we automatically have sneak attack. We speak a special language, which Pet Mouse, special language, already delightfully flavory. We get cunning action, which was that go do some special things with your bonus action thing. And at 3rd level, oh, I should have made this a 3-parter. We got to talk archetypes. This is where you pick up your rogue subclasses. There were 3 in the player's handbook, 4 more introduced in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and 2 new ones that came in with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And we, I believe, Sam, why are we picking Swashbuckler from Xanathar's Guide today?
Well, this was Baby's first rogue build, personally. I believe this one, Swashbuckler itself, comes out of Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think it may be in both places, but I think you're right.
Absolutely good. Xanathar's had not yet come out when I was a baby rogue. But Swashbuckler has a couple abilities, particularly at low level, that make the action economy of the rogue sing. I was talking earlier about how the bonus action is so important to rogues and how you want to use it to hide as much as possible so that no one perceives you and no one attacks you, because that uncanny dodge only works once and the monster has multi-attack. It always has multi-attack. There is a special ability that the Swashbuckler has that, for me, makes the whole class. And it is called, and this is true, fancy footwork. If you go up and you make a melee attack, you get to just dance away as a free action. Is it a reaction? No. Is it a bonus action to disengage like your cunning action allows for? Also no. You get to just fully escape your consequences for lols. Traditionally, if you are a rogue, you might, as a ranged rogue, attack, bonus action, hide. Next round, same. A melee rogue has to make a choice of staying engaged with an enemy and therefore at risk of being persiven, or staying a little farther back, basically not being the ranged rogue, and sort of giving up those options to hide in between rounds. But with fancy footwork, you don't have to choose. You get to hide in between every round just the way your ranged counterparts might, and not suffer any consequences for it. And who doesn't love escaping their consequences? I don't know. No rogue has ever tried.
I love it when they reach the scene of the crime. McCavity's not there. You know, it's
Never happened.
very much
what's a McCavity?
the way of that. And I love imagining this one as well, because it, like the swashbuckler, I love being swashbucklers. The fancy footwork plays so beautifully into the flavor of it, because it also, for me, it's you sort of dancing away from them, but it could also be like you dancing over here and somehow standing behind a tapestry and they've totally lost track of you, and then you swashbuckle your way right back out next time. And it's beautiful for the imagination. It's delightful. All right, you get rakish audacity too.
The other thing that we're getting here, which is these two abilities that you get right off of the top, are for me the whole reason to pick Swashbuckler. Other things happen later, but these two. Fancy footwork, the other one is rakish audacity. I think it was toujours l'audace in Unearthed Arcana, but we kept the same energy, which is effectively if you are 1v1 with a monster, like if that monster has no friends beside them, they're all alone, you still get your sneak attack. Do you need a flanking or a source of advantage? No, you just get sneak attack if you are soloing. Or in fact, any circumstance except if they have friends within 5 feet of them. And it is another aspect that makes rogue roguier. One of the reasons I love Swashbuckler is that it is very straightforward, that you still, no resource management that one really has to worry about, but also that it makes rogue better at being what we are. Your ability to hide and disengage and do everything better. Your ability to sneak attack just a little bit better. And we can also see with Rakish Audacity why we were starting to think of ourselves as a charisma rogue, because you get bonus to your initiative rolls equal to your charisma modifier.
I love that very much. All right, so we've got a fancy footwork and a rakish audacity, and we are running out of time because I love to build characters and I take too much time. But let's pick so at 4th level, we will have picked up an ability score improvement or optional feat. Do you have a preference for this, or 1 or 2 feats that you think people might want to keep an eye on as a rogue?
Yes. So because we've come in with an elf today, we are going to already be in a very good position with our dexterity score, the one big true rogue stat. And it gives us, as we go all the way up, a lot of room to take feats. Fighters get to take feats because they get a lot of ability score improvements. Rogues get to take feats as we like, because once we max out our dex, everything else is candy. If we want to increase our constitution for some hit points, or our wisdom, or our charisma, all of those are great, and we absolutely can. And we can also take feats. If you are a ranged focused rogue, I do very much like the sharpshooter feat. It works very nicely on us, particularly because we do attack at advantage fairly often, meaning that the -5 to attack in exchange for +10 damage is a pretty good deal for us because we're rolling with advantage all of the time. But a couple others that I like are Crossbow Expert, or more recently from Tasha's, there's Firearms, which will also give you the ability to make ranged attacks from melee range without disadvantage. But the Firearms one, as I recall, also gives you an extra point
I'm gonna look
to
it up. I don't know what Firearms
dexterity,
does.
if I recall. But the one that I like for our Swashbuckler today is Revenant Blade from Eberron. And it works because we are an elf, and that increases our dexterity. And while we are holding a double-bladed scimitar, a thing With 2 hands, we gain a +1 bonus to armor class, and the double-bladed scimitar has the finesse property when you wield it. As y'all might recall, the finesse quality is a prereq when making a sneak attack with melee weapons, so we can see how perfectly this fits with our melee swashbuckle buckle, and the notion of an elf just swash. It makes a swash sound. What more could I possibly want?
Oh,
So
what a
I
great
like the
call.
Revenant
I've
Blade
never taken
feat.
this.
It's underappreciated, and it's a great feat. Eberron has lovely content in it, from race options like the Kalishtar that I've been playing recently to feats like this. It's one of my favorite supplements. So
Amazing.
there we are.
All right, we get expertise. What are we picking up?
Yes. Yeah. So if there was something you didn't get to take at the beginning, now we get to take a couple more. I personally like taking perception. That really depends on your party. If you have a druid and a cleric and a ranger, maybe you don't need to pick it up, but we don't know who's in our party yet. So I tend to take perception, and this might also be a good place to pick up either sleight of hand or thieves' tools. And note, those are different. Do check with your GM which one they're going to call for in different circumstances. I've sometimes rolled with people who don't call for thieves' tools and call lockpicking through sleight of hand. And these sorts of things are really where you just want to make sure that you're playing to the table that you have. So we'll probably take sleight of hand today because it's a generalizable skill. But that one is, I have discovered the hard way, an easy one to trip over. So check with your GM about how they like using thieves' tools.
Great call. And that takes us up to level 6.
Yep.
At further levels as a swashbuckler, we will pick up things like panache and elegant maneuver, and they are just as much fun as they sound. But that is for the future for our elf. And all right. We did have a request. I'm sorry, Tadawin, to roll up stats today. We usually do standard points, but I am going to run out of time. And this is if you're making characters for the very first time, it's up to you and your table. There's no reason you can't roll them, but it is very easy to just use the standard to make sure you have a nice balance.
I love the standard array. I use it all the time.
So we would put tops and decks.
We are, and we're doing it in part because the Revenant Blade gave us a +1, which means that we will be at an even number and get that nice bonus.
Yes, we will.
And so, yes, we can put other things wherever we want them, but I am thinking Charisma 14.
Love it.
Well, that one's pretty important to us. Let's see, some Wisdom 13. Some
Excellent.
Constitution 12, because we may yet grab a feat that gives us a +1 wisdom or something like that will knock up that perception proficiency that we took, and those insights. Our 12 in Constitution, excellent. And now we get to pick from our dump stats. I have found myself taking strength as a dump stat for rogues pretty often because other than athletics checks, rogues often get away without taking too much strength. And frankly, seeing my swashbuckle rogue try to swim was a great point of comedy. It's not a lifeboat, it's a death boat.
Incredible, which gives us our final scores of 8, 18, 12, 10, 14, and 14. A nice spread across the abilities. Yeah. And next time we'll roll for them for sure. We've already decided we're an urchin, which means we get to pick some personality characteristics. Which do you have some in mind, or we could hit random and see what we get?
I think we should hit random, and it's a perfect place for it. This is exactly where I like to randomize. Who are we?
I like to squeeze into small places where no one else can get to me. Goes with urchin beautifully.
Oh, hit me.
Oh, and I don't like to bathe. So that's the thing that we know about ourselves.
They won't see you, but they will smell you coming.
Really, it does seem like it'll hurt our stealth abilities, but it gives us conflict.
Yeah.
our ideals, community. We have to take care of each other because no one else is going to do it. I love it very much.
So good for an urchin background.
Our bonds. I owe my survival to another urchin who taught me to live on the streets. Pairs perfectly with the ideal we just rolled. Gives us an NPC that we can feed to the DM.
PC hook.
Yep. That person will definitely never be in any danger.
I've played that with a fellow urchin character and had a lovely bond together with them.
Oh, I love that.
It can also be a good way to connect with another player at the table, especially if they haven't picked a background yet.
Brilliant. And finally, our flaw. If I'm outnumbered, I will run away from a fight, which really goes with the hide in small spaces that we already picked back up.
And escape the consequences of your actions, which is core rogue class. The background doesn't know, but we do.
All right. I believe I need to actually add those now. Unless I've added them twice. We'll figure it out. It's fine. Community.
While you're adding those in, shall I talk about the care and keeping of rogues?
I would love that because I loved hearing. We were talking a lot about advice for being a rogue, but that's not all there is to D&D. Of course, there's being in parties together. Sam, how do you help? How do you play with a rogue in the best way?
Yes, I've not played one recently, which means I've played adjacent to them recently. And just as rogues, we have a certain etiquette of we should probably be thoughtful about stealing other party members' stuff. We should probably at least think about it before we do it, just to be kind to our fellow players. In turn, we hope for generosity from our fellow players, and I think that tends to come up most often with the rogue scouting ahead. This is encountered at a lot of tables where the rogue, who has a very, very, very strong stealth check, and often characters like ours will have a good perception check, is a great scout. Classic received wisdom is not to split the party, and so there can often be a lot of reluctance to let someone go ahead. I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you, if you have a rogue in your party, to let them do it, to let them sneak ahead, and to let them do their scout or do whatever tricky thing they do before you, the barbarian who rushes in. Give it just that moment as a player, because this rogue has chosen that class because they want to do the sneak around. And so the generous thing that we can do as a player is give them opportunities to do the things that they do best, just as we give bards the opportunity to talk their way out of situations rather than necessarily always charge into combat. And like we charge into combat every so often so that our martial classes will have plenty to do, we try to give opportunities for other people at the table to experience the thing they made the character for. And it's always a blessing to have a player who will see what it is you're trying to do and give you the space to do that. I think as Dungeons and Dragons players in particular, we're very, very wary of sneak aheads, and we often have impulsive characters who might just barrel through it and get bored. But I would encourage people who play with rogues, let them do what they do sometimes to be who they are. Make terrible decisions and get away with it.
I love that very much. And of course, as with all things, there's a balance. You want, like, ideally, as the rogue, you want to do the same thing for everybody else. Make sure everyone has an opportunity to be their best or worst or most interesting selves in Dungeons and Dragons. We are almost done with Errol Elflin. We need a picture. I'm thinking for our swashbuckler.
Whoever has that, what's it called, DreamWorks smile.
like this little one. I think we got kind of a determined smirk going on with them.
Yeah, I dig that. Which also kind of fits nicely. Little one, little Lurkin. I dig it.
I This is also a beautiful picture. So thank you to the artist. And I'm gonna add the starting equipment and just any last things we're gonna need to pick up a scimitar to go with our revenant situation. But we'll probably also want a rapier and a short bow.
Yep, those tend to suit. It is pretty common to do some kind of a 2-weapon fighting, but do remember that we get to use that bonus action to hide as a rogue. This is why the bonus action is so full. As a melee rogue, we are very deeply tempted to make that second attack, and if you whiff on the first one, maybe go for it, and then fancy footwork away, because you can. And that's why we'll want to have another sword on side, often a short sword, possibly others. But yes, keeping a short bow, because sometimes we make ranged attacks, and we're very good at those too.
All right, and final adjusts to our character. We get to all the bells and whistles that I love for D&D Beyond. We got some new sub backdrops this month that I am loving very much. So let's pick. We got spooky villain backdrops. Let's go generic player's handbook. I don't mean generic, I mean classic. On this one as our backdrop, and then we're going to pick a frame. And
oh no, we've been framed?
It's the worst nightmare. Let's go for a knave's hat, which just sits
perfect.
On our arrow elephant. We will don't forget to pick up all your equipment before you go into battle, but we can go ahead.
Actually put on armor. Not that I've ever forgotten it. Nope, never.
Very much same. And now, just under the wire, we have Errol Elflin, level 6 rogue, swashbuckler, with a flourish and a bow, I assume, at your service. Sam, I want to keep you for many more hours to go through all of the advice, because obviously there's more advice for different levels of play, for offbeat builds, for more sophisticated strategic elements, for combinations as those archetypes grow for the other archetypes. But I love Errol, who we've built today. Thank you so much for joining me. Do you have any final thoughts on rogues for our audience today?
If you have someone out there who might want to try Dungeons and Dragons for the first time, but they may not be into fantasy and they've never done anything like this before, consider a rogue. We try to create the most positive first experience possible, and I think rogues make that pretty good. They are a straightforward class with a lot of media tropes that even someone not into fantasy will understand. We just based this on definitely not pseudo-medievalist fantasy. Your Han Solo types, anyone in any caper movie ever. These are things that will be accessible to other folks, and your new player will come in. They'll make some absolutely bonkers, like 25 stealth check, and it'll feel great. They'll get into combat, and they'll roll advantage, and they'll hit, and they'll roll, like, all of the dice that they have, and, like, probably borrow someone else's dice, and that will feel great. Rogues are a great class to introduce people to this hobby because it sets them up for a great first time doing a lot of the core things that we do in this game. Introduce someone to a rogue.
I love that. I endorse it heartily. They're very fun to play. They have all of the advantages you've talked about. I love that very much. And where can the people find you, Sandalev?
Well, they can't find me. My stealth check is too high, Amy, but occasionally I pop up my head and am perceived before I fancy wheel work away. At Tchaikovsky on Twitter, that's right there below my name, ChaiKovsky, and I'm a role-playing streamer throughout the Twitchernet, and you can find that whole schedule on my personal Twitch About page. That's twitch.tv/Delevely, Delevely.
And until next time, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time on D&D Beyond. It's D&D.